because you never know, you might be the voice of hope someone else has been waiting for in the darkness.
My name is Harper Bennett, 35 years old. I used to think that nothing in this world could hurt me more than a messy breakup. But I was wrong. So wrong in that moment, as my father, Richard Bennett, his eyes devoid of any emotion, spoke up in front of dozens of guests. "You need to leave now. This is a family party and your name isn't on the list." I realized I wasn't just an outsider. I was someone erased from my own family. Sloane, my sister, stood behind him, the corners of her lips curling into just enough of a smirk for everyone around to understand. I no longer belonged here. I clutched the gift box tighter, trying to keep my voice from trembling. The crowd watched my every move as if they were witnessing a silent tragedy unfold. In my head, only one question echoed. When did I become a stranger to my own mother, the woman who once promised she would always be there for me no matter what? Sometimes, the greatest pain doesn't come from strangers, but from those who share your blood. Have you ever been excluded by your own family? If my story reminds you of someone, please tell me, because no one deserves to be turned into a ghost in their own family portrait. I have stood on that doorstep so many times in my life, but never have I felt so aliened. The Bennett house sits by Lake Travis, nestled in the wealthy western suburbs of Austin, where every childhood summer of mine drifted by with the scent of sunlight, pine resin, the sound of piano music spilling from the living room, and the laughter of my mother, Evelyn Bennett. She used to be a piano teacher, always wearing soft floral dresses, making breakfast for the three of us every Sunday morning. In my memories, my mother was the only source of comfort whenever I felt lost within my own family. My father, Richard Bennett, is a true Texan, once a football player, later a self-made real estate mogul. He's always been proud of his steadfast ideals. Family must be united, children must respect their parents, and above all, we must appreciate what our grandparents have left behind. During those endless dinners around the table, he would remind us, "Sloane is the role model of the family, Dylan should follow her example." That sentence was repeated so often, it became a familiar refrain. My sister, Sloane Bennett, 38, has always been the shining jewel of the family. From an early age, she excelled in school, won scholarships, played the violin, and was always taken by Mom to various social events. She stayed in Austin, majored in business administration, and came to work for our father. To relatives and neighbors, Sloane is the perfect woman. Successful, kind, devoted to Mom, the caretaker of the house. In every family photo, she's in the center, confidently smiling, holding Mom or linking arms with Dad as if the world truly does revolve around her. Dylan is the youngest, 8 years my junior, and almost grew up in a different world. He's like Dad, loves sports, never burdened by expectations, free to experiment with anything from painting to skateboarding. Dylan could skip school to go fishing with Dad and no one would scold him, as long as he was home in time for dinner. To me, Dylan was the only one in the family who ever took my side, though most of the time he just quietly watched rather than spoke up. And me, Harper Bennett, the middle child, born into a position that no one truly hopes for, yet can't quite forget. I liked sitting alone reading books, taking apart old radios, losing myself in technology and imagining I'd grow up to be a creator, not the keeper of traditions. I was never good at the piano, nor the graceful daughter my mother once dreamed of. My academic record was never as impressive as Sloane's, nor did I make Dad proud like Dylan did. Somewhere along the way, I became a stranger in my own home. Without even realizing it, on holidays I always felt like just another guest. In the family album, the Christmas photo from when I was 14 is missing a corner. My face is blurred beside the Christmas tree while Sloane stands in the center in a red dress. Dylan in a Santa hat. I still remember the sting I felt when I saw my mom slip my tiny patent certificate into her vanity drawer, instead of hanging it on the wall like my sister's awards. During those moments, Mom would often come sit beside me on the stairs, gently stroking my hair and saying, "I know you're not like Sloane or Dylan, but you're special in your own way. The world needs people like you, Harper." That was the first time I believed I could be different and still be loved. But it seemed, to the rest of the family, I was forever just a faded imitation, a shadow existing between two shining stars. When I received a full scholarship to Stanford, my father couldn't hide his disappointment. He wanted me to stay in Texas, close to home, help manage the family business, be there for my mother the way Sloan had. I remember his eyes the day I told him I was leaving Austin, cold, tinged with bitterness. If you want to chase that tech fantasy, go ahead. But remember, family is the one thing you'll never be able to replace. Mom stood behind me, holding my hand tightly. I never knew if, in that moment, she was trying to keep me close, or simply helplessly watching me stray from the path she'd envisioned for the three of us. From that day on, the distance between me and my family only grew. Sloan officially joined the company with my father, earning his trust to handle major projects. The two of them gradually became a unit, while I was just the name brought up when they needed a story about the one who went away. At every reunion, I found myself feeling more and more out of place. Even the little stories at home, who just graduated, who broke up, who won some small prize, I only heard about through Dylan or saw on my mom's Facebook. Every time I returned to Austin, I felt like a tourist visiting an old site. My bedroom had become a storage room, filled with things no one used. Childhood memories were packed away in cardboard boxes under the stairs. Dinner was still full of Dad's laughter, talks of business, neighbors, Sloan's latest achievements, while I was usually left out. If I tried to speak up, the conversation would quickly shift to Sloan's company, Dad's projects, or Dylan's new awards. Even when I won small awards at school, Mom was the only one who remembered those days. Dad just asked when I'd be coming home for real. Mom kept the letters I sent from Stanford, carefully pressed in a drawer, but she only called occasionally, always in a hurry, her voice a little tired, as if afraid someone might overhear our conversation. Life went on like that until the day I received a message inviting me back for Mom's 60th birthday. A major milestone in the Bennett family and one I hoped could help me rekindle something lost between me and Mom. But that hope turned out to be more fragile than anything I'd ever held on to. I studied day and night, worked part-time in a lab, poured all my early savings into developing a small software project. When that project caught the eye of an angel investor, I truly believed my life had finally unlocked the next chapter. I founded Hypernova at 25, a tech startup valued at millions after 2 rounds of funding. The name Harper Bennett started appearing in articles and trade magazines. Even with a packed schedule, I always made time for calls home. But with every call, the distance only seemed to grow. The first time I invited my whole family to visit the Hypernova office in California, Mom hesitated, saying, "I'll try to make arrangements," while Dad just grunted and changed the subject. "Sloan just signed a contract with a major restaurant chain, did you hear?" Even when I sent press clippings, invitations, and little gifts with the Hypernova logo for everyone, all the responses I got were polite at best. Sloan replied with a curt message. "What's the point of success out there if you're not here with Mom?" I laughed, telling myself she only said that out of jealousy. But the bitterness still clung to me, through sleepless nights. During a big shareholder meeting, I called home hoping to share a bit of pride. Instead, Dad sighed on the phone. "When are you going to settle down? You've made it, but you should come home, get married, and have children so Mom can stop worrying." I tried to respond, but Mom only interjected with an offhand comment. "Sloan is here helping me with everything." I'm so grateful for her. Each word stung, burying my achievements in a dark corner nobody cared to look at. The calls grew less frequent. More and more I found myself only sending emails or short texts, afraid I was being a bother. For Mom's birthday, I ordered flowers from San Francisco to Austin, along with a handwritten letter about my latest project. The card was returned with a note. "Mom's busy, we'll talk when we see each other." I tried not to think too much about it, but on holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, I was always the last to come home, usually assigned to the guest room. Dylan, my little brother, also started to grow distant. His messages turned into requests for help. "Can you lend me some money to pay off my credit card?" I helped, never asking for it back, just hoping he'd call me with a real conversation someday. But it was always cold. Short exchanges, never more than 10 lines. Meanwhile, Sloan kept cementing her place in Austin. She became Dad's right hand in real estate projects, gradually managing even Mom's bank accounts. At every family gathering, I felt like a shadow on the sidelines, while Sloan glowed beside Mom, telling stories of big contracts, helping with shopping, taking care of Mom's health. More than once, I overheard her telling relatives, "Harper only remembers Mom when she wants to brag about something. Otherwise, she doesn't care about the family." Some nights, I lay awake, thinking about the years Mom quietly kept my first patent certificate like a private treasure. She never hung it on the wall like Sloan's awards, but she always reminded me she believed in me, even when no one else did. That memory now fades like mist, replaced by a cold reality. I can't remember the last time Mom called to ask about my work. Every holiday I'd send carefully chosen gifts to Austin. French perfume Mom loved, rare whiskey for Dad, sometimes concert tickets for the whole family. In return, just a few short thank you messages and then silence. Many nights, I wondered if they had simply gotten used to my absence in the family photos. They only mentioned me if someone asked, "How's Harper these days?" And the answer was always, "She's busy, always traveling, just focused on her company." Sometimes I saw my image cropped tiny in the corner of a group photo, a reminder that I was on the outside, a guest rather than a real member. I don't know when that loneliness grew into an invisible wall I couldn't break. Sometimes I asked myself, what's the point of success if no one in your family truly sees you, if no one accepts you as Harper? Not as a second Sloan, and definitely not as the runaway daughter like Dad says. And so, day by day, my hope that I'd one day get to hug Mom and tell her about what I'd accomplished faded away, replaced by a sense of loss I couldn't name. I prepared for this trip back to Austin more carefully than any important business trip. For weeks I told myself, just this once, Harper. This is Mom's 60th birthday, a chance for everything to change. I scoured auction houses for the perfect gift, a classic Steinway mini piano, the kind Mom had always dreamed of since her teaching days, a limited edition with only a handful in the entire country. I even asked a partner in Europe to help me search, then personally checked every detail, from the enamel to the sound, just hoping to create a real surprise. The gift was packed with care, shipped to Austin a week ahead of time along with a handwritten card. "Mom, thank you for teaching me to love beauty, for teaching me my first song, for teaching me to believe in myself when no one else did." On the day of departure, I chose a simple yet elegant blue dress. Just formal enough, a way to show respect for this occasion. With every step of preparation, I kept telling myself, this time, it will be different. This time, I will be welcomed. I will hear Mom laugh. I will finally sit in the arms of my family again. I pictured the moment Mom would see the piano, her surprised smile, the warm hug I'd missed for so many years, but reality was nowhere near as gentle as my imagination. When the taxi dropped me off in front of the lakeside mansion on Lake Travis, the Texas sun was already high, more dazzling and merciless than ever. The garden was full of cars, people moving about, music and laughter drifting all the way to the gate. I had barely taken a few steps when my father appeared, standing upright, his face expressionless, those cold brown eyes examining me as if I were a stranger. "Harper." His voice was clipped and sharp. I managed a timid smile and lifted the gift box. "I'm here for Mom's birthday. Where is she, Dad?" He cast a glance over me, then shook his head. "You need to leave. This is a family party. Your name is not on the list." He enunciated every word, slow and deliberate, making sure every guest around could hear. I froze. All around me were curious, surprised, sometimes even amused or pitying glances, as if they were watching an unscripted drama unfold. Sloan appeared behind Dad in a dazzling pink silk dress, arms folded, eyes flicking over me with triumphant satisfaction. "You should understand that, Harper," she said quietly, but her words cut straight to the bone. The air turned cold, laughter faded. Every gaze seemed to converge on me, scrutinizing. Somewhere I heard someone whisper, "Who is that girl? To be treated like that?" Someone else recognized me and shook their head, chuckling. She must have done something to get kicked out like this. I tried to swallow my tears, taking one more step toward my father. "I just want to see Mom, to give her this gift. No matter what, I'm still her daughter." He shook his head and turned away, leaving me stranded in the yard where I'd once played as a child. I tried calling Mom, once, twice, 3 times, but every call just rang and rang. My fingers trembled. I couldn't tell if it was anger, heartbreak, or shame. I looked at the gift box in my hands and wondered if all my effort, all my hope, had just led to this single, humiliating moment. Inside the mansion, I could still hear my mother's voice somewhere, her familiar tone, her soft laugh as she greeted relatives and old friends. But I was standing outside the door, invisible, unnoticed. Sloane fiddled with her phone, pretending to be busy, shooting me another cold look. Dylan, my younger brother, appeared on the porch, staring at me for a moment before turning back inside, as if he didn't know what to say. I turned away, determined to keep my posture straight, taking measured steps from the place I had always longed to call home. On my shoulders, the Texas sunlight burned, as if it wanted to scorch every last feeling I had left. Behind me, laughter rose again. Someone said, "Let's go eat. Just let their family handle it." I don't think I'd ever felt so small, so alone, or so unnecessary. I am the daughter of Evelyn Bennett, the woman who taught me my first piano notes, the lullabies that sent me to sleep. But now I can't even step through my own front gate, simply because I no longer fit the image of a good daughter in my father's and sister's eyes. All my life, I don't think I will ever forget that feeling, standing outside my mother's biggest party, clutching my gift, surrounded by the laughter of those called family. And in that moment, the most painful thing wasn't being turned away, but realizing that maybe, in Mom's heart, my image was also fading into nothing more than a blur at the edge of the family portrait. I returned to the hotel as the afternoon faded, carrying the gift box that no one had even touched. My steps felt heavy as I walked down the long hallway, the sound of my suitcase wheels echoing emptily on the tiled floor. When the door closed behind me, I collapsed onto the bed, unable to even take off my heels, my dress wrinkled, makeup smeared by tears I'd held back all morning. I stared at my phone, its screen blank. Part of me still naively waited. Maybe she'd call soon. Maybe she'd ask, "Harper, you've arrived? I'll come out to the gate and meet you." But with each passing minute, that hope just became a crueler joke. Broke down and cried like a child. Not Harper, CEO of Hypernova, strong and confident on stage, not the independent woman praised in the media, but the 12-year-old Harper, sitting alone on the stairs listening to Mom play piano, hoping someone would call her into the living room. After all those years of striving, long-haul flights, work parties, and business dinners, I was still the abandoned child, only now I was old enough to realize I never truly belonged there. I replayed every memory, receiving awards, studying late into the night, returning home on holidays just hoping to sit with Mom in her armchair and hear her stories from her teaching days. There was a year when Mom secretly kept my first patent certificate in a drawer, occasionally pulling it out to dust it off, but never daring to hang it alongside Sloane's awards. I remembered the first time the press mentioned my name. I sent the link to the whole family, but no one replied. I remembered birthday messages sent to Mom, always met with short thank yous, never once a question. "How have you been, honey?" I went online and scrolled through birthday photos that family and friends were already posting on Facebook. Sloane stood next to Mom, dazzling like a star, Dylan in the back raising his glass with a big grin, my father seated proudly. They took pictures with the 3-tier cake, with bouquets of flowers, and then a photo by the piano I'd sent, Mom sitting on the bench, fingers brushing the keys, her eyes brimming with emotion, but no one mentioned me. In every congratulatory comment, people only praised Sloane for organizing such a wonderful party. No one asked about Harper. A chill crept over me from the inside out, sadness, anger, and emptiness all at once. I wondered if I should text Mom one last time, but reason told me, what could make someone stay if their heart had already turned away? I opened the message box and slowly typed each word. "I came, but it seems you don't need me anymore. Goodbye." My fingers shook as I expected a reply, but because I knew that this time, I might never get a real answer again, started packing. Each shirt, each little keepsake folded into my suitcase, as if I were sealing away the parts of my heart that hadn't yet healed. My flight back to California was booked with a single click. That night I lay on the hotel bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, too exhausted to sleep. I heard music drifting in from the street, a lonely country tune, aching for home. My mind spun with questions that had no answers. If you've given everything and it's still not enough, should you keep trying? If, in your family's eyes, you're just a failed copy, is there anything left to prove? I thought about all the times I'd tried to hold on to those fragile family ties, only to receive indifference and coldness in return. I thought about my colleagues at Hypernova, who always called me Big Sister, a place where I was always the last to leave the office, where I listened to the worries of young employees, where I recognized even the smallest efforts of my team. Maybe, in that world, I got to be my real self more than anywhere else. But here, in Austin, Texas, at the house by Lake Travis, at my mother's birthday party, I was just an outsider. When dawn began to break, I opened the window and looked out over the still lake. The water was perfectly calm, unruffled, almost mocking all the turmoil inside me. A quiet sadness settled in, not regret for what I'd lost, but the feeling of finally having the courage to let go. I knew this was it. It was time to draw a clear line for myself. No more clinging, no more hoping for hugs, for blessings or for questions that would never. I closed my suitcase, booked the earliest flight back to San Francisco, and silently promised myself I'd never let anyone diminish my worth again, not even those I once loved most. The sky was only just turning light and I still couldn't sleep, lying there counting the cars on the road, letting myself drift into numbness. My phone lay silent on the table. Not a single call, not a single message from Mom or anyone in the family. I looked at the flight ticket confirmation and told myself that once I left Austin, things would feel lighter, that all this pain would fade away in the rush of life back in California. But deep down, I knew I was only fooling myself. There was something I still couldn't unravel, as if some invisible thread still tied me to this city, to that house, or rather, to the memory of the mother who once gently held my hand. I finished packing up the last little things, trying not to look at the gift box still on the table, the little piano I'd hoped would be a bridge, an apology, and a wish to be my mother's daughter just one more time. I planned to call a taxi for the airport earlier than scheduled, but then there was a knock at the door, soft, gentle, not the way a hotel staff member or any acquaintance would knock. I hesitated a moment, then got up to open it, and there stood Mason Collins, Sloane's boyfriend. Mason looked at me for a long moment, clearly uneasy. He wore a white shirt, holding a steaming cup of coffee, his face tense, with a hint of guilt in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. "Harper, I'm sorry to show up like this, but I don't think I can stay silent anymore," Mason said softly, looking straight at me as if weighing every word. I was half surprised, half wary. Probably the last person I'd expect to seek me out this morning after everything that had happened. "Are you here to deliver a gift for Sloane?" I asked, trying to make a joke to cover up my exhaustion. Mason shook his head slightly, silent for a moment, then said, "No, I'm here because of you. And because of my conscience, too." I invited Mason into the room. The air was awkward as we sat at the small table. He set down his coffee, glancing around before he began. "I wanted to talk to you last night, but Sloane wouldn't allow anyone to mention your name in front of everyone." I wasn't surprised, just waiting to see what had brought him here at this early hour. "Harper, you probably don't know. Part of why I moved back to Austin and took the job at Hypernova was to be closer to Sloane. But when I found out you were the CEO, honestly, I was stunned. I'd only ever seen you on the company website and never imagined I'd end up with a girlfriend who was my boss's sister." Mason sighed, frowning. "Lately at the office, everyone speaks of you with so much respect. Do you know that? Everyone says you're fair, passionate, always standing up for what's right and making sure no one ever feels left out. I used to think those were just workplace compliments. But after what happened yesterday, I finally understood those things are real. Thought about all the times I'd tried to hold on to those fragile family ties, only to receive indifference and coldness in return. I thought of my colleagues at Hypernova, who always called me Big Sister, a place where I was always the last one to leave the office, the one who listened to the younger employees, the one who recognized even the smallest efforts of the team. Maybe, in that world, I was more myself than anywhere else. But here, in Austin, Texas, in the house by Lake Travis, at my mother's birthday party, I was just an outsider. As dawn began to break, I opened the window and looked out at the calm lake. The water was perfectly still, not a ripple in sight, almost as if mocking all the turmoil inside me. There was a quiet sadness settling in, not regret for what was lost, but a feeling that I finally had the courage to let go. I knew this was the end of the line. It was time to draw a clear boundary for myself. No more clinging, no more hoping for hugs, for well wishes, for check-ins that would never come. I closed my suitcase, booked the earliest ticket back to San Francisco, and silently promised myself I would never let anyone take away my self-worth again, not even those I once loved most. The sun had barely risen and I still couldn't sleep, lying there counting the cars passing by outside, letting myself drift into numbness. My phone sat silent on the table, not a single call, not a single message from Mom or anyone in the family. I looked at my freshly confirmed plane ticket and told myself that once I left Austin, everything would feel lighter, that all the pain would fade away with the fast pace of life back in California. But deep down, I knew I was just fooling myself. There was something I still couldn't let go of, as if some invisible thread was still tying me to this city, to that house, or rather, to the memory of the mother who once gently held my hand. I finished packing the last little things, trying not to let my eyes fall on the gift box still sitting on the table. The little piano I'd hoped would become a bridge, an apology, and a dream of being my mother's daughter just one more time. I planned to call a taxi for the airport earlier than planned, but then there was a knock at the door, soft, gentle, not the way a hotel staff member or any acquaintance would knock. I hesitated for a moment, then got up to open it, and there stood Mason Collins, Sloane's boyfriend. Mason looked at me for a while, visibly uneasy. He wore a white shirt, still holding a steaming cup of coffee, his face tense, a trace of guilt in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. "Harper, I'm sorry for showing up like this, but I don't think I can stay silent anymore," Mason said quietly, looking me straight in the eyes as if weighing every word. I was half surprised, half wary. He was probably the last person I'd expect to come find me this morning after everything that had just happened. "Are you here to deliver a gift for Sloane?" I asked, trying to joke to hide my exhaustion. Mason shook his head slightly, silent for a moment, then said, "No, I'm here for you, and for my own conscience too." I invited Mason into the room. The air grew awkward as we sat down at the small table. He set his coffee down, glancing around the room before starting. "I wanted to talk to you last night, but at the time, Sloane wouldn't let anyone mention your name in front of everyone." I wasn't surprised, just waiting to see what was important enough to bring him here so early in the morning. "Harper, you might not know. Part of why I moved back to Austin and took the job at Hypernova was to be closer to Sloane. But when I found out you were the CEO, honestly, I was stunned. I'd only ever seen you on the company website, never imagined I'd end up in a situation where my girlfriend was the boss's sister." Mason exhaled, furrowing his brow. "Lately at the company, everyone talks about you with such respect. Did you know that? They all say you're fair, passionate, always standing up for what's right and making sure no one ever feels left out. I used to think those were just typical workplace compliments. But after what happened yesterday, I finally realized that everything they say is true." I looked at Mason, feeling both confused and unexpectedly hurt. Not because of his compliments, but because, out there, people who were once strangers were willing to see and respect me while the people closest to me had pushed me out. Mason continued slowly. "Harper, last night at the house, I overheard Sloane and Richard discussing how to keep you out of the party. They made a guest list, deliberately crossed your name off, and agreed that if you showed up, they'd use the excuse, 'Only real family can attend.' I couldn't believe the way they talked about you. Your mom had no idea. Evelyn just thought you were too busy to come. It was Sloane who told her that. When you were standing at the gate, your mom was kept inside. No one told her anything." Every word from Mason cut deep into the doubts I'd carried for so long. So all the distance, the missed calls, the invisible wall between me and my mother, it wasn't just my fault, or because I was too obsessed with work. Someone had actively built those barriers. I trembled, feeling a mix of outrage and pain. "Why?" I asked, not really expecting an answer that would make sense. Mason looked at me, honestly. "I think, with Sloane, it's her fear of being overshadowed. She's always felt your mom cared more for you. Every time Evelyn mentioned your achievements, Sloane would get visibly upset. And Richard, he just doesn't want anyone disrupting the order he's built for the family. He says you're a traitor, ungrateful to your roots, so you don't deserve to be part of important occasions." I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "And what about my mom? Did she ever try to find out the truth?" Mason shook his head, gently placing his hand over mine. She really had no idea. The whole party, she just thought you didn't come because you were busy with a new project. Sloane even told everyone not to mention you around your mom so she wouldn't be upset. The air in the room felt frozen. Suddenly it was clear that every door that had closed on me last night had been intentional. Every silence, every averted gaze, every unanswered call was part of a long-running script. I felt anger and bitterness, but also a glimmer of light. At least now I knew I hadn't imagined it all. Mason hesitated but finally said, "Harper, if you stay silent, nothing will ever change. People will keep thinking you're cold, selfish. I can't just stand by and watch someone I respect be wronged like this. You need to tell the truth, even if it's hard, even if it breaks things open. I'll stand with you." I looked up at Mason, feeling gratitude and a surge of resolve. For the first time in years, I felt an urge to confront things, to reclaim my place, to let the world know I'm not the one who abandoned anyone. If my family has chosen to write their own version of the story, I'll rewrite it with the truth. And I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I never imagined that morning would become the turning point of my life. After that conversation with Mason, I didn't go straight back to San Francisco. Instead, a strange energy welled up inside me, a mix of hurt, anger, and the desperate need to finally speak up after so many years of being misunderstood and pushed to the margins of my family. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusted my clothes, wiped away the tears that had swollen my eyes through the night, and told myself enough. It's time to reclaim the truth. Not just for me, but for Mom, who was also a victim of divisions she never even knew existed. Mason went with me, a quiet but determined companion. He took me to the Bennett mansion once more. My mother's birthday party was still underway. The air in the garden was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of food. Everything looked normal, but I knew that behind every smile there were shadows no one wanted to name. At the steps, Mason squeezed my hand, an unspoken gesture of support. "If you back down now, you'll never forgive yourself," he whispered. We entered the garden through the side gate. There were still plenty of guests, people talking and eating. Suddenly I caught my mother's eye in the corner of the living room, chatting with an old friend, her smile gentle but tired. Across the way, Sloane was showing off a new necklace, while my father stood with his business associates as self-assured as ever. Before I could say a word, Mason suddenly stepped forward. He raised his voice, loud enough to echo across the rows of chairs. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something that needs to be said." The entire garden fell silent, dozens of eyes turning to us. Sloane froze. My father was stunned, and my mother looked at me, then at Mason, bewildered. I saw my mother's hand tremble as she realized it was me, and Sloane turned pale, her gaze darting between. Mason announced clearly, "Allow me to introduce. This is Harper Bennett, CEO of Hypernova, someone I am incredibly proud to work with and, coincidentally, Sloane's sister." A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. Some people looked at me in surprise, others whispered among themselves while Sloane was speechless. My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, glaring. "Harper, what are you doing here? We've already made everything clear." I took a deep breath and stood my ground. "Mom," I looked straight into her eyes. "I came here for you. I prepared a gift you once dreamed of. I wanted to celebrate your 60th birthday with you. But Dad and Sloane kept me outside the gate. They said this party was for family only." "Did you know about that?" My mother was stunned, turning from my father to Sloane, her eyes brimming with questions. "How could that be?" she choked out. "Sloane, you told me Harper wasn't coming because she was busy." I waited in silence for her answer, but Sloane just shook her head, tears welling up. The guests looked uncomfortable. Some coughed awkwardly, others dropped their gaze. I stood tall, no longer afraid. "I called you several times, Mom. No one picked up. When I was standing outside the gate, you were in the house, not knowing anything. Dad and Sloane made the decisions for both of us. They crafted a story about Harper being selfish, only caring about work, only wanting to show off family. But that's not true, Mom. I've always looked toward home. It's just that no one wanted to open the door for me." The silence felt suffocating, every second stretching endlessly. My mother quietly left her seat and came toward me, her hand trembling as she touched my cheek, choking. "Sweetheart, I had no idea. I thought you were just busy." I gripped her hand tightly, tears finally streaming down, not tears of despair, but the feeling of finally being able to speak the truth. By now, Sloane had broken down in tears. "You don't understand, Mom," she sobbed. "All these years, you always talked about Harper, even when she was far away, even though I was the one beside you every day. You always asked about her, always compared me to her. I felt like I was nothing unless I tried to keep you close, unless I kept Harper from coming back." My father was silent too, his eyes for the first time showing a hint of confusion. He spoke softly, almost like confessing to himself. "I only wanted to hold this family together the best way I knew how, but maybe I was wrong." Every emotion erupted into tears, not just mine, but my mother's, and Sloane's as well. The guests began to leave, everyone sensing our family had just survived an emotional earthquake in the middle of the party. The air inside the house softened, no longer anyone's stage, but finally a place where all the pain could come into the light. After that confrontation, the Bennett family mansion felt like it had shed the glamorous shell we'd all clung to for so many years. Mom and I stayed in the living room after the last guest left, the space quiet but strangely warm. She was still reeling from it all. She hugged me tightly, whispering in a voice that sounded like she'd just lost and then found a part of herself. "I'm sorry, Harper, I left you alone for too long." In her arms, I was no longer a tough 35-year-old woman or a wounded outcast. I was just a child again, longing for recognition, once more led by the hand through the sky of my childhood. I told my mother everything I'd kept inside, the loneliness over the years, the times I'd called only to get silence or polite replies, the pain of being treated as a stranger in the house where I grew up. Mom sat quietly, listening, tears silently falling onto her trembling hands. "I had no idea things had gotten so bad," she choked out. "I thought you'd all grown up, had your own lives, and I didn't know where to start putting things back together." The door swung open and Sloane stood at the threshold, eyes red, her expression a mix of guilt and self-defense. I knew she'd heard everything, but this time none of us looked away. Sloane spoke first, her voice low. "I've hated you for years, Harper. Not because you're a bad person, but because Mom always talked about you, always compared you to me. I did everything to keep Mom close, to make her proud, but the more I tried, the further I pushed you away." Sloane's shoulders shook as she turned away, hiding her tears. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You never had to push me out to be a good daughter, Sloane. You should have known. If we're honest with each other, there's no such thing as an outsider in this family." Mom looked at the two of us, her eyes full of sorrow and regret, but also shining with hope. "From now on, I promise I won't let anyone come between you again. Everything must be said openly. No one else gets to tell your story." The door swung open and Sloane stood at the threshold, eyes red, her expression a mix of guilt and self-defense. I knew she'd heard everything, but this time none of us looked away. Sloane spoke first, her voice low. "I've hated you for years, Harper. Not because you're a bad person, but because Mom always talked about you, always compared you to me. I did everything to keep Mom close, to make her proud, but the more I tried, the further I pushed you away." Sloane's shoulders shook as she turned away, hiding her tears. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You never had to push me out to be a good daughter, Sloane. You should have known. If we're honest with each other, there's no such thing as an outsider in this family." Mom looked at the two of us, her eyes full of sorrow and regret, but also shining with hope. "From now on, I promise I won't let anyone come between you again. Everything must be said openly. No one else gets to tell your story." My father entered, his face less tense, his voice no longer as commanding as before. "I'm sorry, girls. I thought keeping things my way was protecting the family, but it only hurt everyone more. From now on, I'll let you make your own choices." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first time in my life I'd ever heard my father say sorry without any conditions attached. Dylan, my little brother, came over. He didn't look at anyone, just murmured, "Harper, I'm sorry too. I know I've been distant, always asking for help, never asking how you really felt. I promise I'll try harder, not to leave you alone anymore." Smiled. A light, relieved smile I hadn't felt in a long time. I looked around the room that had once been the stage for all my family's performances, and realized that, for the first time, everyone was truly listening to each other. No one was hiding anything anymore. Spoke, gently but firmly. I'm grateful that everyone finally spoke the truth. But I have to be honest too. I won't be the person who stays silent and endures everything anymore. I don't want to return to my old role, the daughter who always has to sacrifice, always has to bend to keep the peace. From today, I'll only stay close to those who truly respect me. If anyone continues to spin stories, to manipulate, I won't be part of it anymore. Everyone has the right to tell their own story. But no one has the right to tell someone else's. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. My father sighed, for the first time stepping forward and placing a hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything, but his eyes held genuine acceptance. Dylan smiled awkwardly, while Sloane came over and took my hand. You're strong enough now, Harper. You're not an outsider anymore. None of us believed that just one day could heal all the wounds of so many years. But that night, sitting with Mom, gazing at the golden light filling the living room, I knew I'd finally drawn a healthy boundary. I knew, from then on, I would only stay in touch with my family when things were truly healthy, honest, and respectful. No one would ever again force me to choose between self. 6 months after all the truth was laid bare in the mansion by Lake Travis, my life had changed profoundly, even though some things could never return to the way they were. Autumn in Austin was gentler than I remembered. Waking up in San Francisco, I still sometimes dreamed about the old house, about the sound of Mom playing piano before I ever knew about the world's hurts. But in those dreams, the loneliness was gone. There was only a strange peace, as if I'd finally let go of everything that once held me back from truly growing up. I threw myself into my work at Hypernova, leading a new, challenging project, and for the first time felt truly respected in both worlds, my career and my personal life. Getting promoted was no longer the goal. It became a natural outcome of newfound confidence, of daring to show my true self and set healthy boundaries with everyone around me. I started mentoring young female engineers, telling them my story, about the value of being different, about how you have the right not to become anyone's version but your own. My relationship with Mom healed in the gentlest, most natural way. Evelyn Bennett, my mother, kept her promise, never letting anyone come between us again. She called me every week, telling me about the new pieces she was learning, about the little garden she was replanting after summer, about the books she thought I would enjoy. We planned for her to visit me in San Francisco for my next birthday. When she stepped off the plane, I realized she had grown older, her hair more silver, but her eyes warmer and steadier than ever. She wrapped me in her arms, sobbing, "I'm proud of you, Harper. Truly. This time." We spent precious days together, walking along the beach, playing piano in the corner of my small living room, talking about everything, even the old sorrows. Once I asked her, "Mom, did you ever blame me for leaving home?" She shook her head. "Of course, but I blamed myself more. I didn't have the courage to protect you from adult jealousy and control." Dylan began to change too. He started sending me genuine messages, sharing his plans for independence, apologizing for all the times he'd been distant. He came to San Francisco for Thanksgiving with me and Mom. For the first time, the three of us made dinner together, awkward and joyful at once, as if we were piecing back together old memories that had been fractured. Sloane needed more time, but after everything that happened, she took the initiative to seek therapy. For the first time, she texted me, "I'm sorry for not letting you be yourself. Maybe we were both victims of the fear of being compared." At first, our conversations were just brief lines, but gradually they became longer, more genuine. Once, Sloane sent me a photo of Mom wearing the necklace I'd given her, saying, "Right." She didn't need to say more. I knew that was her way of opening up. That Thanksgiving, I invited the entire family to San Francisco. There were no more performances for approval, no more obligatory calls or forced compliments. We sat around the table, even Mason joined in, and everyone laughed and talked about the little things. A new dish Mom learned from her old friends, my new project, Dylan telling jokes, Sloane sharing her travel plans. Thank you, Harper, for giving this family a chance to heal. That was the moment I knew I'd stepped out from the shadow of loneliness, fear, and doubt, that I truly deserved a place in the family picture. I didn't expect every wound to heal with just an apology. There are still times when Mom calls and unintentionally mentions the old days, or days when Sloan falls silent, or my father tries awkwardly to show he cares. But now, I'm strong enough not to use those moments as a measure of my own worth. I know I don't need anyone's approval but my own. Standing out on the balcony as the city lights came on, I thought about the journey I'd taken, the years of loneliness, the sleepless, tearful nights, the flights home and away in silence. If there's one thing I want to say to anyone who's ever been pushed outside the boundaries of their own family, it's this. Don't be afraid to speak up for your own truth, even if your voice shakes. Don't let anyone else rewrite your story, even if they're your closest kin. If you've ever been turned into a shadow in your own home, know that sometimes stepping out of the darkness is the only way to find the light. The only way to truly grow up. If my story reminds you of yourself, or someone you know, please share it in the comments below. And remember, true happiness is being able to be yourself, not the version someone else wants you to be. Thank you for listening to my journey. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, a veterinary technician in Austin, Texas, and for 10 long years, every decision I made